Hello, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, a show trying to make the world safe for ADHDers. I'm a clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist, and I'm also the parent of a couple of ADHD kids. And guess what I'm married to? Yes. And so, I've been treating ADHD for, 40 years or so, I guess. And we've learned a lot since I started out, and I've learned a lot since I started out. Uh, ADHD wasn't even a diagnosis in 1980, so we've made some progress. Most of us really don't like the name and don't really think it's very accurate, but we didn't have hyperfocus back in the day either, so it was all about, oh, we don't have any attention. Well, no, that's not true. Matter of fact, some cases we have very good attention. Okay, this last month, actually, I think it is, I've been talking about different categories of job that are appeal to ADHDers and that they tend to do better in. And I thought, well, it could be if they make the last show the last one, or we could look at the kind of the whole lifelong characteristics of ADHD employment. And I did. And guess what? ADHDers tend to move around a lot. They change jobs 2 to 3 years or so after getting hired, and they change a lot. Uh, they're good at the kind of jobs that happen fast, when lives are at stake and it's emergency stuff and things are fast and intense and that sort of stuff, and that gets their dopamine going, and they just love that. But there tend to be a lot of things, and a lot of the problems are more personal, I guess. We'd say than well, than anything about can't do the job or any of that stuff. Okay, there's one big characteristic is if you can get them through college, if you can get a bachelor's degree, they have fewer problems in the workplace. And that may just be a selection thing where the folks who have just a teeny bit of ADHD can hang in, and get through college and get a job and keep it because they didn't have that much to deal with. I don't know. Nobody does, but the tend well, basically, like I said, you tend to have high intensity jobs. That tends to be what they like, but there are some problems. Okay, is your job is going to require some of the boring things, some of the things that ADHDers don't like very much. Having to do the paperwork, having to get the report in on time, having to keep up your stats and do things when you don't really want to do them, and that sort of thing. And they have more troubles with that. They just do. And especially when they first start out, that's when things happen uh, more frequently. The job changes go faster, and I just told him to pick his job, and etc. And that tends to be a problem throughout life, really. But when they hit middle age or so, that tends to smooth out a little bit. But or unfortunately, it just gets so they get totally disenchanted with the whole work environment and don't bother. Don't try to have any kind of a career or any of that stuff. It's really it's problematic. But we know there are two things that minimize that, make this not such a gloomy prediction. One is if they can get through a bachelor's degree in college, that probably means that they have pretty good control over things and uh, can hold down a job. And then the other thing is that, treatment. We know treatment, including medication, is real important. Okay, we like medication is, and some people are, oh my God, no, 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 put my kid on speed and all that. But there's research that suggests that putting them on medication before age 7 will sometimes allow the brain to change. Because, we kind of think of the brain's static, it stays the same, but it doesn't. It changes all the time. You learn something new, your brain changes. The neurons that fire together, wire together. If you have ever taken any kind of a neuropsych course or a neurology course, you've heard that one. But basically that's what happens is your brain, if you start doing something that you hadn't been doing before, your brain will try to shift a little bit to make it easier for you to do that. And it's a real important for lots of things. And there are things that change it over time. Some people will get facial tics when I say this, but meditation. If you do meditation regularly, and I mean, half hour or so, build up, start off doing that, 20, 30 minutes, actually causes your brain to change and be able to achieve greater control over like attention and executive functioning in general. I'm not sure anybody exactly knows how that works, but in large extent, if you're meditating, whatever method you're using, you could look at that as attention training, because every time, even if you're doing the most gentle form, which is just breathing focus, when your mind gets distracted and you start going off on something else, I got to pick up bread on the way to work or whatever. And you're supposed to gently bring yourself back to your breathing focus and keep going with that. And you do that every time. Well, that's basically it's attention training. It's a very naturalistic kind of, it's just a naturalistic way of doing it, but you're basically training your brain. You're taking it back calmly, quietly, back to your area you were trying to focus on, which in a lot of meditation, or a lot of different approaches are breathing focused. I mean, that's not the only way, and that may not even be the best way for a lot of people. It's definitely the easiest one to teach, and I know a lot of people, that's all they ever teach. Even some of the biggest personal development people on the planet, all they ever talk about is breathing focused stuff, and they don't really call it that. They think of an approach that excuse me, that has to do with breathing, of course, but they play around with it and say, you got to say my magic word or it doesn't work. That's not true. The research is very consistent that if you use, we won't even call it a mantra. If you just use a word that you kind of repeat over and over, or a really short sentence or phrase, you will get the benefits of meditation, and you don't have to pay somebody a lot of money for a Sanskrit word. I've had people do things like Jesus is love, or God is love, or just stay in tune. I'm not sure what that one was about, but it definitely was one that was used. And it helps you because like it's meaningful to you. Some word that somebody throws at you may not mean anything to you, and therefore it's less effective. But anyway, so that's a lot more I'm tended to go on meditation, but that's a really important one to know about. And the other things that we know work in general do pretty well, actually. Coaching. Um, I have Coaching is different from therapy. Okay, therapy tends to be more focused on what slings and arrows you've endured through your life and how to better adapt to them and adjust to them. Whereas coaching is very future oriented. Is okay, you're here and you want to get to there. How are we going to make that happen? And it's um, a lot more here and now, present oriented, and skill acquisition kind of oriented. It's uh, it's one of those things that has really grown rapidly. I mean, in just uh, 20 years or so, it has just, it used to be you said, oh, I'm a coach. It meant you had a whistle and a baseball cap on. Uh, but nowadays, there are all kinds of there are ADHD coaches, and there are executive coaches, and there are cancer coaches, and, that just name a category of the stuff that people have to adjust to. And there's probably a coach who is more than willing to take you on. Uh, but coaching, it works surprisingly well. I mean, I was two things, I thought, I was, when you're in the business, like I was, you get kids that haven't been diagnosed, haven't been treated. They're just, raising Cain and causing troubles in class and at home, and parents are, besides themselves. But I've had kids that, were not on medication and that came in just wild and woolly, and they actually do pretty well with relaxation training or meditation, whatever you want to call it, which surprised me. I mean, I was not expecting that to be a good thing. I was just checking and seeing, because that's one of the things I used to do a lot of, and I still do actually. But it's one of those things that you would think, why would an ADHD kid, a little boy who's hyperactive as can be, why would he be able to just stay there and be real focused and get real calm? Well, I don't know how exactly, but he sure could do it. And it worked out really, really well for him. The other thing they do respond well to is coaching. Um, Probably because coaching is not always, not how does that make you feel kind of thing, which way I was trained as a psychologist, it was like, you don't ask it that. That's 1950s kind of treatment. But um, what coaching does is you're asking, okay, and how would you like to be? What improvements would you like to make? How would you like to get better at that? How do that kind of thing? And then you develop a method of getting there, of getting to where they want to be. And it's taking account of the neurologic conditions, but you have to also be real alert as a coach, because you want to catch the good stuff when you see it. It's got to, so you've got to be paying attention. You can't be thinking, gee, what did I didn't even know. You've got to be thinking. But coaching, particularly, you get improves performance, improves productivity, improves emotional well-being, and companies tend to like it because it improves employee performance, and it also helps develop independence and confidence, self-awareness, and helps them see that the only limitations they really have are what they hold in their head. And that's That's an important thing, especially for an ADHDer to be able to link with and to think about. So we know then that ADHDers tend to have more troubles adapting and adjusting. They tend to have a lot less, when they're adults and they don't have the teacher and mom and dad at home and all that stuff, and they're out there on their own. And they haven't had a whole lot of, especially if they haven't had a whole lot of treatment, they will not stay at jobs for a real long time. Uh, for some reason, the military seems to be an exception to that. I'm not sure why, but I mean, we had a lot of kids when I was in the Air Force that I know had ADHD, but they also had this guy with a whole bunch of stripes on his sleeve who was keeping pretty close tabs on him, but as an adult, not as a kid, so it was a whole different thing than being a parent. So the people there in the military, that is, get a lot of supervision, but they also have a lot of important jobs. So there's a lot of intensity there, and they tend to do well with intensity. If you're an avionics guy and you screw up the radar on a fighter, that there are some consequences to that. Or if you, oh gosh, I remember one gal. I was at Lincoln Heath, and we had a thing called the F-111, FB-111. It was a swing wing fighter bomber, and it was the first one that had what is called terrain following radar, which means you turn on the radar and you take your hand off the stick and you pray a lot, and it's supposed to follow the terrain, keep you down low below radar so that you can't get identified, and shot down, obviously. But they don't do real well over water, but let's just say a gal, young troop that was a crew chief. So she had a few years in, lock wired, which, take the wire and lock a couple of pieces of metal together. She did it wrong. And as a result of that, the F-111 flew into a wave at full speed and killed the whole crew. Not acceptable. There was a big stink about it. A whole bunch happened. Obviously, you don't lose people that way. You're not supposed to, but she just wasn't paying attention, and probably, I did not do well. I did a general psychological evaluation on her, and she wasn't anxious. She wasn't depressed. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't, all those things. And she was, pretty normal troop. And we were not looking at ADHD back in those days. But I would bet that was more the issue. But that's, that kind of intensity keeps people, even with people with a lot of ADHD difficulties, keeps them focused. Oh crap, I could kill somebody. They just do better under those kinds of circumstances. And it's well, like everything else, you have to adapt, you have to adjust. You can't, you got ADHD, you've got to adapt and adjust to that. You have a kid with ADHD, you've got to adapt and adjust to that. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard, but you try to do the best you can. But anyway, like I said, the more education you can get them through, the more treatment, especially coaching. And kids who get started on stimulant medication do not tend to progress to drugs, hard drugs, or that sort of thing. They do better in life in general. And so, as a matter of fact, they are less likely to progress to drug abuse. Their problem issues are being treated, are being, biochemically. That's a nice thing if you can do it. I mean, I know there are some people who are hypersensitive to that sort of thing, and they have difficulty staying on the medication and all that sort of stuff. And unfortunately, there's a very low rate of people actually staying on the medication. So that's another issue we probably need to talk about later. Okay, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingras. This has been Dr. G's ADHD Chat, show trying to make the world safe for ADHDers. And my website is terrygingrasphd.com. That's Gingras. And I'm not French, believe it or not. And you can sign up for my newsletter, have a podcast, and they have different content. So, it's twice the content if you sign up for both of them. The podcast is, where you can sit here, listen to podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and there's a show. I have a show on Facebook too. So anyway, let's get you back to your regular life, and we will catch you next week. And if you have some ideas for things I should consider discussing, that sort of thing, please let me know. I've been doing this for about 8 years now, maybe 9 now, I think. And always looking for new ways, new questions. Okay, we will catch you next time.